well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like, we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round, or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
I have ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like, you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis, telling you, they're like 25 years old, telling you, you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your... Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get-rich-quick schemes for a while...
I don't really understand what's going... Like, the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all...
Yeah, that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is... It's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically... It's almost impossible to trace. Right? People in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign... and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated, left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money. So the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But... that person eventually, but ultimately the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me, you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time...
How does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it I
too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there, so I can put my money.
So
there.
Is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. So CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
That's basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten to the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized like, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology and they do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied, they're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win. It means playing League of Legends while an investor goes, like at the time that was seen as this charming, like genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and Friedberg, shady. This guy,
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
It's very strange. And these offshore entities were also using like U.S. branches. Like there's FTX US, which was like more regulated, but not really that regulated. The problem is when the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral, going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal, and we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden, it starts this firestorm because people are like,
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today, or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an
deal? But I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is a lot of people had
like what exactly what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
Or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. I really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college and all my friends get an MLMs. Multi-level marketing, sort of like just like hey, you're gonna get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich sim. In fact, that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett. That when everything goes wrong, some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Like I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and
bizarre that so many people got duped, and I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. He was CryptoKeys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot appreciate your transparency. Kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few people.
You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh. That's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas, we're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to do...
Analogy for losing your house?
What's funny? Yeah.
I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say I give you this yield. He starts explaining, like, this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so, ultimately, Matt Levine's like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But, again, it stops short. Everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So and ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about, and they were like donating through them for like all these
each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines. Big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. He called it fiat at FTX, but it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. This is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you, it's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. This stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of, there was already all this worry. In the past, that summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to – he's doing interviews with FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
With regulators, they were all trying to – Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed, and CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this, like, battle between them. And ultimately, he goes start trading with it unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But, like, they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. Lateral, like, dollars or some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin, and that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. Where he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be, there would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have it's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff.
Regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like, what could they have possibly done to make it easier?
I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane, and it just was kind of, I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League.
Party.
That's right, but
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no investment funds, they invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets. Really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that
role, you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back this stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. Like I just cover stuff all the time and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago, I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at. And he said, is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. Gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, which of that token? Then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like, there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses. Like, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like, they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is not.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming
and it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill, like, was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this? What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it.
Inevitable.
It was inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So he decides to donate dark to Republicans. And part of the accusation is he knowingly did this through one of his, hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some, third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that
one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose their. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, he lost it on the platform. He says the 18 million was on FTX or whatever, and he never got $1 out of it. But that was what the deal was for. Balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like, I forgot. It's so silly. It's you might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, "Oh no, the money's actually still there." I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. Like, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, teas for a while. But like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through who's able the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured.
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later. But you actually own a bunch. You believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like most of this 10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually a company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. Never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is service that said, you cannot move, like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people ultimately going to find out what we're doing here?
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX?
Regulated? Like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that actually campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate.
Involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019, GT. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. Looks like they have $10 billion. But if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. They're everything. I don't have access to the book. Like I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, where's the money? He goes, well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam, and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX, is he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where honestly you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. Find out like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan, eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all the money to a politician on my behalf. You're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. Yeah, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was a someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred. Guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like.
Well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
It's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like, he said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that.
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I was kind of, I root for nerds to like be that successful that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking.
Yeah. So by the third interview, I'd studied him and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to it was the terms of I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place, and people notice like, wait a second, a lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of. Annoying. So like
that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies, and change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
Like, actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah,
you don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like Sam had. I start covering it. And then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work, because if you're
through crypto
ransomware, yes, 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys, and so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost betting on the house. There was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. Everyone thought, oh, cryptos, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then there's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews.
5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the he cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out. They'll have to. My feeling is offshore entities should not be. They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, I don't know. It's very outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of to their other friends. They're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people
do something like that, like why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing.
And a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could do
abilities. It's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices, and then after he made his money that way, then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader. Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do. I hate to say do your own research, because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost used.
Whiz kid who you listen to him talk, he has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it. Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names, and also really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange.
People that were standing out and saying none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There was these guys, basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest